All right, it's time for another mailbag. Luke Smith joins me today to discuss Notre Dame's dream apparel sponsor, Antonio Carter's impact, and how long Marcus Freeman will be at Notre Dame, plus so much more coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Irish. It is Thursday, May 18th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Whether you're watching along on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform, please subscribe to the show if you have not already. My name is Tyler Wojcik, and I am the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer for college football talent at the Fox Sports headquarters in Los Angeles. I've also been podcasting about the Notre Dame football team since 2020, and in today's episode, I'm going to be joined by my old co-host, Luke Smith, to cover a wide range of topics as we respond to questions submitted by some of you in another mailbag segment. I appreciate everyone who sent in their questions this week. We've got some great ones to get to, and if you've got a question that you want answered in the future, you could send them on Twitter to @LockedOnIrish or on Instagram @LockedOnIrishPod. All right, let's bring in Luke. All right, Luke Smith is back on the show, and before we get to the mailbag questions, I have a couple questions I want to bounce off you first, and the first one has to do with Notre Dame's deal with Under Armour, because we now know that it's going to expire soon, and Notre Dame is going to hit the open market for a new apparel deal. And Luke, you have been a little outspoken about Under Armour in the past, so I'm curious, what's your dream scenario for Notre Dame's next potential partnership?
Anything that isn't Under Armour. And I actually think I heard somebody, it might have been Pete Sampson, suggest that he thought they might still go back to Under Armour, which would really make me very upset if that happened, because that has run its course. I think they've done a overall pretty poor job with the stuff they've put out over the last near decade now. And basically at this point, I would take pretty much anything short of New Balance or Puma that isn't Under Armour.
What are the odds Notre Dame goes with New Balance or Puma?
With our luck, probably like 30%. I don't know.
I don't know
nothing.
which one's worse. If I have to live in a world where Notre Dame is sponsored by New Balance and I'm watching my television and all of a sudden Jack Harlow is the spokesperson for New Balance, he's wearing Notre Dame gear and representing Notre Dame, my brain would break. I like Jack Harlow because he represents Silva, but I do not want to live in a world where that's a possibility.
No, and I think we may have just spoken that into existence. So, but honestly, I think of the options out there, it does seem like, and I know Nike historically has kind of lowballed Notre Dame with the offers that they floated to them. And this time, I don't think that the contracts we're going to see are as lucrative. It's also interesting when you look at these deals. I was reading an article from Matt Brown of the Extra Point the other day, and I think something that kind of gets lost in this is that the dollar figure you see associated with these deals are just in merchandise and apparel. Like, it's very rarely a cash payment for each year. That's been included in, I think, a couple deals recently. I think Kansas is one that comes to mind that has one of those. But really, that figure that you see often is just like that amount of money in apparel and merchandise, which I think is something important to keep in mind here.
So do you think Notre Dame, I know that they've had somewhat of a checkered history with Nike and it hasn't worked out in the past. Notre Dame obviously wants to be a top priority. Do you think that is still going to be a determining factor in their next partnership?
I don't know. I wonder how they think about this in like this new era. And I also kind of wonder like how student athletes can benefit from NIL with some of these new, apparel deals. I don't know. I think you've seen that a little bit in women's basketball. I think there's a girl from Louisville who's now at LSU who has an Adidas deal. And now that she's at a Nike school, that's still okay, apparently, somehow. I think that the problem you see with men's sports is like men's basketball players just aren't in school long enough if they're that good to get a deal while in college, a shoe deal. I guess Bronny James would be an exception to that. And then football players, that just doesn't happen. But back to your original question, I feel like Nike is still a realistic option here, and it's one that I would be very happy with. I'm less inclined for them to go the Jordan way for a couple reasons. One, I just don't think that logo looks very good on a football uniform. I think it's kind of stupid to have a basketball player on a football uniform. And two, I don't want to copy Michigan. So
I was literally just about to ask, does this have anything to do with the fact that Michigan was one of the first schools to do it? Because I agree. I don't love it on the football stuff, but on all the merchandise, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, totally. And that's cool for our purposes, but when you're actually watching the game, it's not quite as appealing.
Definitely. I don't think they'll go back to Under Armour because I think one, and not that Notre Dame really cares about what the fans think about this, but I think the reaction would be so extreme that it would actually be negative for the school. And I was talking to one of my coworkers today who actually played football at South Carolina. They're an Under Armour school, and I was asking him just about what he thought of Under Armour. And we've heard some rumors. We've heard some people speculate that the Under Armour cleats are bad. I think Greg Flamung, actually, one of our friends, was on this last year, and he attributed some of the foot injuries that Notre Dame was dealing with to Under Armour. So my friend Javion tells me the story how when Deebo Samuel was at South Carolina, he was dealing with an ankle issue, and that it was so bad that he was like, screw this, I'm not wearing Under Armour cleats anymore. So he started wearing Nike while he was at South Carolina, and he taped the hell out of them, like spatted them so much. But Under Armour still could tell. I mean, it's probably pretty clear from the toe that it's a Nike shoe. And apparently they flew into South Carolina and were like, you cannot do this. We're fining the school a ton. He's like, I don't care. I'm wearing Nike. Now, there's probably only one player in that program that had that kind of juice to do that, but Deebo was that guy, and he did it. So I think that's pretty telling and should be, hopefully, a factor when Notre Dame makes their next decision.
Yeah, I agree. It is interesting, though. Notre Dame's been putting out this, like, Freeman travel diary. I don't really know why they're doing that, but they are. And I did notice that Freeman was visiting with Kevin Plank at Under Armour like last week, despite the fact that negotiating window has closed. So who knows?
Yeah, that didn't make me feel too great. I think the fact that Notre Dame has Freeman, maybe he'll have some sway in Notre Dame's next partnership because he's very fashion forward.
Sure.
I don't think we're necessarily going to be going with like white Vans as cleats, although maybe that is a possibility with Freeman. What did you think of Andy Staples from The Athletic suggesting that that Notre Dame could potentially do an arrangement with the shoe deal? Like, I understand what he was saying, and you brought up that point about Haley Van Lith of Louisville and how she's now at LSU with her deal still with Adidas. Like, how many people at Notre Dame, especially basketball, where these shoe deals would matter most, like, I don't think Cormac Ryan was setting up his shoe deal during his time at Notre Dame, or even if he had the option, I don't think it really would have worked out or been much of a difference.
No, I saw him at the Notre Dame Northwestern baseball game at Wrigley yesterday, and he looked like just a normal student. I don't think anybody realized it was him, to be honest. And now he's going to Chapel Hill, and he'll be a Jordan guy. But I do think there's some significance to that. And maybe with this new era where you have a coach who actually recruits and probably has some better relationships with those grassroots shoe deal guys. I mean, that's how college basketball recruiting's been done for decades, is just you're an Adidas or a Nike kid, which is kind of wild. But I don't know. Maybe there is something to that. What you're speaking to, obviously, is giving athletes the freedom to kind of just go with whatever they want. If Notre Dame was to go with somebody that didn't manufacture athletic gear like shoes. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I guess it does open that door, but I just don't know how much utility there actually is there for the kind of kid that Notre Dame is bringing in.
Yeah, I see that. All right, let's move on to the big news this week. Antonio Carter II, his decision to transfer over to Notre Dame. And I haven't really talked to you about this at all, not even offline. So on a scale of Cameron Smith to Alohi Gilman, how impactful do you think Antonio Carter will be at Notre Dame?
So if Gilman's a 10 and Cam Smith's a 1, let's call it like a 6.
Cam Smith's a 0.
Okay, fair. Let's call it like a 6-7. I think 6, more towards 6, just because I do think he'll be serviceable, and perhaps to good. But I think really this is a depth play for Notre Dame, and one that they absolutely needed to make. You always have some concerns about how these guys are going to translate at the next level when they've been playing lower quality football, especially when they've been playing Division II. But I do think it's telling that there were a lot of schools that were interested in him that were, at a high level, like LSU and Florida. So it's a really good pickup, and one Notre Dame should be happy with, and one that they needed to make.
So do you think that Carter will become a starter by any point during this season, or do you think he'll just be the first guy off the bench?
I do think he'll start at some point. I also just am curious to see how that transition goes to safety, knowing he's played a lot of corner in college and really hasn't played safety. But I think he'll be starting by probably midseason, if I had to guess, alongside Xavier Watts. But I don't know if he'll be a day one starter, particularly against like a triple option team like Navy.
Maybe he just becomes a box safety. I think this move is actually more impactful for next year's team. Well, it's certainly great to have him for this year because Notre Dame desperately needed another safety back there for depth purposes. You're right. That transition to safety is a little bit concerning to me. And something that I was thinking about was Wisconsin. They were pitching him as a corner. Ole Miss was saying, hey, come be a nickel over here. If he was willing to go to Notre Dame, he's accepting that, like, he thinks he's going to be better at safety, which is something that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, because if he was like, I don't know about playing safety, I just want to play corner, I don't think he would have gone to Notre Dame. Now, I haven't asked Antonio Carter this, but that does make me feel a little bit better about how he'll acclimate to the position.
Yeah, that is interesting too, that he was getting recruited at different positions across this circuit here. And this is what he ultimately settled on, a position that he's not, that's not his home position or his natural position. So I do think your argument holds some water there.
Okay, so if he's not Gilman, would he be, what's like a tier below? Nick
Let's call him
McLeod?
like a Cody Riggs when healthy.
Yeah, Cody Riggs was actually pretty solid when he was out on the field. He was from Florida, right, too? So there's some connections there.
Yeah.
All right, I would certainly take that for this season. But let's get into some of the mailbag questions. We got some good ones this week. This episode of Locked On Irish is brought to you by Bird Dog, some of the most comfortable shorts and pants in the market right now. When it comes to Bird Dogs, nobody does it better when it comes to fit, comfort, and versatility. I recently got a new pair of Bird Dog shorts, and I can tell you right now, I look better and feel great wearing them. I started wearing them to the gym, and they're already my favorite pair of shorts to work out in. Their stretchy fabric makes them comfier than any of my other shorts, and their pants are so stylish that you'll have the freedom to wear them on the golf course, in a meeting, on a date, or hanging out with friends. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, and when you enter promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Go to Bird Dogs today, buy whatever you like, and I promise you'll thank me later. This first one comes from Austin Bradley, who wants to know, do you feel Sam Hartman is being overhyped, or is he underrated? What do you think, Luke?
I actually think he's pretty adequately rated, to be honest with you, at least nationally. I think that maybe there are some thoughts within the fan base, like that he's just going to be, out of this world. And I do think he'll be very good, but there's a little bit too high level of expectations. I think that's something also we have to consider is just like, last year, we didn't see like any proficiency in the skill of quarterback at all. So like you kind of forget what it's like to see a guy that can just do basic quarterback things, if that makes any sense. And you saw that in the spring game. It's like, I forgot that, guys do this.
Yeah,
but
we
I
could
think
throw across the middle.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Right. When you listen to what people across the country talk about him, the phrase that they always use is accomplished, very accomplished, which I think is adequate, because I don't know how well he projects to the next level, and I don't think you hear a lot of people saying that, and that's why he's coming back for a 6th year of college, right? But you can do a lot of things with an accomplished guy who knows the game well, and I do think he's pretty well thought of, across the country. And is he a top 10 quarterback? Probably. Is he a top 5? Maybe. And I think that that's a pretty good place for Notre Dame to be at.
Yeah, there was definitely a point in time where I was getting concerned that the fan base was overhyping him a little bit during spring practice, and we're hearing these things like it's taken him some time to develop, learn the offense, all that stuff. And then he comes out in the spring game and just completely dominates, picks apart the defense. Now I know it's a spring game, but again, going back to what you were talking about earlier, after what we dealt with last season, just seeing that level of quarterback play, even though it's a spring game, was so refreshing to see and so encouraging. Also, the fact that Tyler Buchner just immediately bounced. That's pretty telling.
Yeah.
That it wasn't even, he saw the writing on the wall, and he was like, I got to get out of here. The ESPN, I'm actually looking at this right now. They did one of their offseason rankings of the quarterbacks. Where do you think Sam Hartman ended up?
I think I may have seen, when was this done?
This was done in April.
Okay.
April 10th.
Was he like 9?
He was 7th.
Okay. I was going to 7 was going to be my second guess. So who's ahead of him besides Caleb Williams? I'm going to guess.
The number 2 is pretty surprising. They got Michael Penix Jr.
I was going to say
Michael Penix Jr. is top 5, but 2 seems like a lot. And they got Drake May at 3,
okay.
Bo Nix at 4, and I know Bo Nix had a bounce
Bo
back.
Nix stinks.
Yeah. And then they got Jordan Travis at 5. I'm pretty skeptical about that. And then Cam Rising at 6. I really like Cam Rising, so I'm okay with having him.
I like him. I just don't know how healthy he is.
Yeah, exactly. He's coming off a torn ACL in that bowl game, so I don't really know. So when you actually go through the list, it's very plausible that Hartman is top 5.
This sounds like an argument we would have like from, kind of like those end of those Kelly years where you're looking at who's ranked ahead of Notre Dame, and it's like, why is everybody outside of outside of Alabama and Georgia ranked ahead of them. Like, I think Notre Dame could beat these teams. That's what this argument sounds like to me, basically.
I agree. And we're going to find out a lot, probably not until September 23rd, but that game against Ohio State, we're going to see. Because I don't know, I wonder how many times Sam Hartman has played on national television on the biggest stage in college football so far, despite the fact that he's been the starting quarterback for 4 years at Wake Forest. But we mentioned Tyler Buchner. And that leads us to our next mailbag question. This one even, it hurts to ask. This one comes from Ricardo Caliente. Would you rather see Caleb Williams win another Heisman or Tyler Buchner win one at Alabama?
That's not even a question, is it?
What do you think?
You can't have Caleb win another Heisman. I hate that guy. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I mean, and Buckner's never done anything like malicious towards, like, Notre Dame fans should root for him. I get, and I think that honestly, the overwhelming sentiment is that they will. I understand that some people might not feel the same way about his offensive coordinator, but hey, if he does that, it would obviously hurt. But like, Caleb having success literally like brings pain. So that's the real problem.
Sometimes I'm embarrassed by how much I don't like Caleb, because
he's the worst.
There's points where I'm like, he's 21 years old. It should not bother me this much that he has success on the football field. And then the inverse of that, when USC was losing to Tulane in that ballgame, when they were blowing that game in the fourth quarter, and Caleb couldn't even get on the field because their defense just kept giving up first down after first down. And then they, I think they recovered that kickoff return that was fumbled on that play. And it was arguably the happiest I felt throughout the entire college football season, which is admittedly pretty sad. But I'm with you. I think it cannot be Caleb Williams, because I don't see a world where Caleb wins the Heisman again unless he makes the college football playoff. It's kind of like the NBA MVP. Like winning it that second time, you have to do a little bit more than the first time. So if Caleb wins the Heisman again, it almost certainly means that he went undefeated, or maybe had one loss and still made the college football playoff, which means that he went into Notre Dame and beat the Irish. And that thought, just seeing him dance around in Notre Dame Stadium, makes me sick. That cannot happen. So he cannot win the Heisman.
That's a more practical way of answering that question. So well done. But yes, I agree.
Outside of just, I hate him.
Yeah. Yes.
If Tyler Buchner wins the Heisman at Alabama, that would truly break my brain. So I don't think we have too much to worry about there, but I guess anything is possible. All right, I guess sticking with USC Notre Dame combo here. This one comes from @TakeAGander, will Marcus Freeman or Lincoln Riley last longer at their current school? And I've already put this out. I think Lincoln Riley is leaving after this year. I understand it's kind of an insane take, but that's the hill I'm dying on. So that everyone knows where I stand on this.
Well, I'm with you. I think he's gone, and he's following Caleb to whatever team tanks to the NFL. So I think Freeman will have the longer tenure, barring something very unforeseen this year.
I know. I got some flack when I first presented that a few weeks ago, and I don't think it's that crazy. Like, let's look at the Commanders, right? They're going to be terrible this season. They just got a new owner. It's not really that far-fetched to think that the Commanders...
New owner syndrome?
Yeah, new owner syndrome. Shout out, Bill. If they have the worst record this year, then they're going to take Caleb, and they're going to fire Ron Rivera, and then the new owner is going to be like, hey, I need to make a splash. I need to build my entire franchise around this Caleb Williams guy. Who's the best guy to do it? Lincoln Riley. And then Lincoln Riley's packing up his bags, and he's heading to Washington to coach Caleb Williams. It sounds crazy, but I think when you draw it out like that, it's really not.
I actually think what's more realistic, and granted, well, wait, they may have traded all these picks, so this might actually be wrong, but like, the Rams are going to be horrendous this year.
They do have a pick this year. That would actually not help my theory.
Well, no, here's what I'm thinking. Sean McVay says, actually, you know what? I am going to retire. Stafford's probably going to retire as well. I think that it's more likely Lincoln stays in LA, because my problem is, can you convince Lincoln to go to the nation's capital from LA? So, but if he takes the Rams job, that could be more realistic. I don't know.
I've seen some pictures of his house out here too. It's pretty nice. But on the Marcus Freeman side, we haven't really talked about this. Given the history of Notre Dame coaches, 10 years is typically the limit, right? So what do you think the over-under is on how many years Marcus Freeman will be at Notre Dame?
Let's call it like 6.5.
Yeah. It might seem low, but when you just look at it,
I'm also building in like, okay, so that would be 5 more years, right? I don't know if Ryan Day is going to be at Ohio State for 5 more years. And either Marcus Freeman has not done a good job and he's been relieved of his duties, or he has done a good job and maybe that Ohio State job opens up and he decides to go back to his alma mater.
Yeah, that's really the only. I guess I shouldn't say it's the only thing, because after that 2021 season, man, that kind of broke. It just kind of made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about college coaches and the college football hierarchy and all that. But I think some people are going to hear 6.5 and be like, no way, Marcus Freeman is going to be here way longer. When if you just look at it in general, most coaches don't stay at one school that long. Like Nick Saban is an exception. Kirby Smart is probably going to be an exception as well, but that's also his alma mater. So the situation there is a little bit different. All right, we got last one here. This one comes from @VoluntaryJoel41. If Notre Dame were to play another game internationally, not in Ireland and not versus Navy, what country, what venue, and which opponent would you pick?
Somebody reminded me a couple weeks ago, and they actually reminded me of this in front of people who I didn't really know that well, as they were trying to explain to them my fandom of Notre Dame, that I once said that if Notre Dame was 0-12 and playing in Afghanistan, I'd be there. So as a joke, I tried to find some proper venues in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any of these cricket pitches hold more than 14,000 people, and that's on the high end. Most of them are like 6. So an actual answer, one that I think would be cool, and something that I would like to see actually, is I would like to get Texas back on the schedule, and you do a home and home and then a neutral site game. And the neutral site game is at Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, which is going to host some World Cup games in the next World Cup. So it's like 87,000 people. It's very realistic, I think, to happen. And that would be cool. Playing Texas and Mexico City, I think that would be very neat.
All right. Wow, that was really good. That kind of beats mine. I was going to say, you said Afghanistan as part of a joke one. I was just going to say we go to St. Andrews, the old course, turn that into a football field and play Michigan in what might be the most elitist game of college football ever played.
Yeah, that's fair. Another school we need to get back on the schedule closer than when it is already. Yeah, I don't know. It was a really good question, and I would just really like to go back to Austin for a game is what I realized more than anything. So if we, get the home and home and then the neutral site, I'm just speaking it into existence. Mexico City could happen.
Yeah, I would love to go to Austin for another game. I would not like to sit in the student section, the Texas student section, that is, because that did not go so well last time when Notre Dame played them in 2016. And I also stayed in quite possibly the most disgusting. It wasn't even a hotel. It was a motel with one of our friends, Charlie.
I stayed in a Motel 6 too there. Or no, sorry, I stayed in a Days Inn. I stayed in a Motel 6 for the College World Series in Omaha. But Days Inn, it was not nice.
Really? The Days Inn in Austin, Texas?
It was pretty garbage, yeah.
Our motel didn't have AC, and it was in Austin, Texas in early September.
It was so hot that weekend.
Dude, I remember seeing the pledges at Texas. We were, before the game, we were at some fraternity tailgate, and the pledges were wearing burnt orange, these shirts, and they had blazers on, and they had white jeans on. And some of these kids, those poor guys, they were sweating through the blazer and dripping sweat all over the beer that they were handing it to us. I'm like, maybe I don't want this one.
Yeah,
because they'd open it too. It was disgusting. I felt so bad for him.
That was a Sunday game, and I remember night game too. I didn't really want to go outside until 2:00 because it was so hot. I was like, I can't be out here all day. I'm gonna die. So, other than that, would love to go back.
Yeah, looking back, it was kind of a terrible day because the game ended the way it did.
Yeah,
and then I don't know about you, but I flew home that Monday at 4:30 in the morning, so I didn't really sleep. I was just so miserable, and then. Even though it was a close game, I was watching that thinking man, Texas is not that good. Are we?
I thought both
worse?
Those teams sucked, and they did. And they did.
But then again, in 2017, when Notre Dame lost to Georgia that year, I was like, man, both of these teams
sucked. Both those teams sucked. Thought it was the same game.
That ended up not being the case. Notre Dame ended up being really good that year, and Georgia was a play away from winning a national championship, which is not something that I would have thought coming out of that game. But I think that's a good place to end it. So, Luke Smith, thanks for the time, dude, and we'll do this again soon.
Sounds good.
That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Irish. Thanks again to Luke, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day, especially those of you who submitted a mailbag question this week. I really appreciate it. Before you head out, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow the show on Twitter @LockedOnIrish, on Instagram @LockedOnIrishPod, and my personal Twitter account @TylerWojciak. That's @Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you guys tomorrow.